There is a grain buried beneath the soil of northern China right now that has been feeding human beings for 8,000 years. A grain that survived ice ages and droughts. A grain that built the foundation of one of the oldest continuous civilizations on Earth. A grain so perfectly adapted to harsh conditions that it can grow in poor soil with minimal water, maturing in just 90 days. The grain is Foxtail Millet, Setaria italica, and for millennia, it was the most important food source in the region that would become China. Then, in 1958, a political campaign swept across the nation. Within 3 years, between 15 and 45 million people were dead from starvation. This is the story of how ideology destroyed what 8,000 years of agricultural wisdom had built. The oldest evidence of foxtail millet cultivation was discovered along the ancient course of the Yellow River at Sichuan. In what is now Hebei province, carbon dating places these remains at approximately 8,000 years before present. But the story begins even earlier. The Peiligang culture, dating from 9,000 to 7,000 years ago, represents one of humanity's earliest transitions from hunter-gatherer societies to agricultural communities. Archaeological evidence from the Tanghu site shows that millet farming was established in the Middle Yellow River region by 700-800 years ago. This was not some primitive scratching at the earth. This was the birth of one of the world's great agricultural civilizations. 2 species of millet dominated early Chinese agriculture. Broomcorn millet, Panicum miliaceum, appears to have been domesticated first. But by approximately 6,000 years ago, foxtail millet had become the predominant crop. The reasons were practical. Foxtail millet is higher yielding than broomcorn millet under favorable conditions, though broomcorn millet tolerates harsher environments better. As human populations grew and agricultural techniques improved, foxtail millet's productivity made it the logical choice for intensification. The Yangshao culture, which flourished from approximately 7,000 to 5,000 years ago, established foxtail millet as the foundation of Chinese civilization. Archaeological sites from this period show explosive growth in human settlement along the Yellow River valleys. The number of sites increased from approximately 200 in the early Yangshao period to nearly 4,000 by the late Yangshao period. This was not coincidence. Millet agriculture fueled population growth, and population growth spread millet agriculture across northern China. The expansion of Sino-Tibetan languages, which includes Mandarin Chinese, Tibetan, and dozens of other languages spoken by over 1 billion people today, coincides with this spread of millet farming. The grain literally shaped the human geography of Asia. The Chinese understood millet's importance. In historical documents, the primary farming package was known as the 5 grains, a concept traceable to the Analects of Confucius. While interpretations varied, millet held a central position in every formulation. Officials of the Han dynasty were paid in millet. Their salary rankings measured not in gold but in grain. The very word for the land and its people, sheji, references G, the grain crop whose husked product is millet, before the Tang dynasty. The primary object of food taxation was millet. The grain was more than food. It was currency, status, and identity. So, what makes foxtail millet so remarkable that it could sustain a civilization for millennia? The answer lies in its biology and its chemistry. Foxtail millet is a C4 plant, meaning it uses an exceptionally efficient photosynthetic system for capturing carbon dioxide. This makes it highly productive even under conditions that would stress other crops. It is drought tolerant, able to produce yields with less water than rice or wheat require. It tolerates poor soil. It matures quickly, in 70 to 90 days, allowing it to be planted after spring, flooding recedes or harvested before autumn frosts arrive. It resists pests. In a land of unpredictable weather and limited resources, foxtail millet was the ultimate insurance policy. Nutritionally, Foxtail millet delivers what its cultivators needed. It contains approximately 12% protein, comparable to wheat and superior to rice. It provides essential amino acids, dietary fiber, and minerals, including iron, calcium, magnesium, and zinc. Its glycemic index is moderate, releasing glucose slowly into the bloodstream rather than causing the sugar spikes associated with refined grains. The B vitamins in foxtail millet support energy metabolism and nervous system function. Modern nutritional science has confirmed what Chinese farmers knew instinctively. This grain sustains human life. For thousands of years, Chinese agricultural practice evolved through careful observation and gradual refinement. Farmers learned which varieties grew best in their local conditions. They understood crop rotation, fallowing, and the use of organic fertilizers. They knew when to plant and when to harvest based on accumulated generations of experience. This was not primitive knowledge. This was sophisticated ecological understanding developed through millennia of trial and error. By the time of the Han Dynasty, Chinese agriculture was among the most advanced in the world, and millet remained at its heart. Particularly in the north, where conditions favored drought-tolerant crops over water-intensive rice, the gradual transition away from millet had already begun centuries before 1958. Wheat, introduced to China from West Asia around 4,000 years ago, slowly gained importance. Historical records suggest that early Chinese considered wheat inferior to millet, food for barbarians and peasants eaten only in desperate times. But wheat's versatility in cooking eventually won converts. By the Tang dynasty, wheat had begun to replace millet as the dominant grain in some regions. Rice, cultivated in the wetter south, expanded its range as irrigation techniques improved. These transitions were gradual, spread across centuries, driven by cultural preferences and technological change rather than political mandate. Then came 1958. Mao Zedong launched the Great Leap Forward, a campaign to transform China from an agrarian economy into an industrial socialist state within a few years. The ambition was breathtaking. Steel production was supposed to double in a single year. Agricultural output was expected to increase dramatically through new farming techniques and collective organization. The method was unprecedented. Rather than industrialize through machinery and expertise, Mao would mobilize China's vast population through sheer collective will. The organizational foundation was the People's Commune. By late 1958, virtually all of rural China had been reorganized into massive collective units, some containing more than 5,000 households. Private land ownership was abolished. Private farming was eliminated. Peasants were herded into communal living arrangements, their cooking utensils confiscated and melted down, their meals taken at communal kitchens. The bonds of family that had organized Chinese agriculture for millennia were deliberately severed in the name of revolutionary progress. What happened next defies comprehension. At the behest of Mao, a series of radical agricultural innovations were promoted across China. Many of these techniques were based on the theories of Trofim Lysenko, a Soviet agronomist whose ideas had already contributed to famine in the USSR. Lysenko rejected Mendelian genetics and Darwinian evolution as bourgeois pseudoscience. He claimed that plants could be conditioned to acquire new characteristics through environmental modification. His theories had been discredited in the scientific community, but they aligned with communist ideology and therefore commanded political support. Close planting was one of the Lysenkoist techniques imposed on Chinese farmers. Mao's agricultural advisors believed that crops of the same species were friendly and would thrive when grown tightly together. Seeds were sown at densities up to 6 times higher than traditional practice. In reality, overcrowding caused plants to compete for sunlight, water, and nutrients. Instead of boosting yields, close planting killed crops or dramatically reduced their productivity. Data from Anhui province shows yields falling from 400 jin per mu to less than 200 jin per mu due to this single policy. Deep plowing was another catastrophic innovation. Lysenkoist theory claimed that plowing soil to depths of 4 to 6 feet would allow roots to grow deeper and access more nutrients. Chinese peasants were ordered to dig down 1 zhang, more than 3 meters. In some cases, workers labored in trenches, passing soil up hand over hand like miners. In reality, deep plowing destroyed soil structure, damaged beneficial microorganisms, and exposed nutrient-poor subsoil. It degraded the fertility of land that had been carefully cultivated for generations. The topsoil that contained the organic matter essential for plant growth was buried under meters of dead earth. Traditional agricultural practices that had sustained Chinese farming for thousands of years were declared feudal and reactionary. Peasants who knew these methods were dangerous were forced to comply or face punishment. The knowledge accumulated over 8 millennia was dismissed as backward thinking. The wisdom of generations was overwritten by ideology. But the agricultural disasters were compounded by an even more destructive program. Tens of millions of peasants were diverted from farming to produce steel in backyard furnaces. The goal was to surpass British steel production within 15 years. Every family, every village was mobilized. Farmers abandoned their fields to mine local deposits of iron ore, cut trees for charcoal, build crude furnaces, and smelt metal. At least 10% of China's forests were destroyed to fuel these furnaces. When wood became scarce, peasants burned doors, furniture, and coffins from cemeteries. The steel produced was worthless. Backyard furnaces could not reach temperatures necessary to produce quality steel. What emerged were lumps of brittle pig iron, useless for tools or construction. The output was secretly dumped in piles that represented not progress but waste. Meanwhile, crops rotted in fields because no one was available to harvest them. Farmers had melted their agricultural tools. The plows and hoes that had worked the land for generations were gone, transformed into useless slag. The system of production quotas created a cascade of catastrophic lies. Local officials, under tremendous pressure to demonstrate revolutionary zeal, competed with each other to report increasingly exaggerated harvests. Some reported production figures inflated 10 times above actual yields. Famous photographs showed children standing atop wheat fields so densely planted that the stalks could support their weight. The photographs were doctored. The yields were fiction, but the government used these fabricated numbers to calculate grain procurement. When communes were ordered to deliver grain based on imaginary harvests, they had to surrender virtually their entire actual crop. While peasants starved, 22 million tons of grain sat in government warehouses. The grain was earmarked for cities, for export, for maintaining the fiction of success. China continued to be a substantial net exporter of grain throughout the famine. When foreign offers of food aid arrived, they were refused. Mao sought to maintain face and convince the outside world that the Great Leap Forward was succeeding. The rulers never starve. As economist Amartya Sen observed about famines, political decisions were made by one group of people while the direct penalties were borne by another. Peasants were forbidden to leave their districts. The household registration system prevented rural populations from fleeing to cities where food might be available. In their starving villages, people foraged for seeds, grasses, leaves, and tree bark. When even these became scarce, they boiled leather or ate soil to fill their stomachs. Even when it destroyed their digestive tracts, they died in fields, on roadsides, in homes where family members lacked the strength to bury them. Some families hid corpses so they could continue collecting the deceased's food rations. Reports of cannibalism emerged from multiple provinces. How many died? Estimates range from 15 million to 45 million, with 30 to 36 million being the most commonly cited figure by demographers. These numbers represent people who died from starvation, malnutrition, and related diseases between 1000 1,959 and 1,962. China's population actually declined by over 14 million between 1,959 and 1,961. The birth rate collapsed. The death rate spiked to more than double normal levels. This was not natural disaster. Weather in 1958 was actually favorable. This was man-made catastrophe on a scale unprecedented in human history. The provinces that had adopted Mao's reforms most vigorously suffered disproportionately. Anhui saw 18% of its population die. Sichuan, known as Heaven's Granary for its fertility, experienced the greatest absolute number of deaths because its provincial leader implemented the policies with particular enthusiasm. The correlation was clear. The more faithfully a region followed the Great Leap Forward directives, the more completely its people starved. The millet that had fed China for 8,000 years did not disappear entirely, but the traditional knowledge of how to cultivate it, the local varieties adapted to specific microclimates, the integrated farming systems that had evolved over millennia, these were devastated. The communes disrupted the transmission of agricultural knowledge from generation to generation. The terror of the campaign silenced anyone who might have spoken up for traditional methods. The population decline eliminated millions who carried this knowledge in their heads and hands. By January 1961, even Mao could no longer deny the disaster. The 9th plenum of the 8th Central Committee began reversing Great Leap Forward policies. Private plots were restored. Communal kitchens were disbanded. Markets reopened. The commune system was broken up. Grain exports stopped, and imports from Canada and Australia helped reduce starvation in coastal cities. But the damage was done. Today, Foxtail Millet is making a quiet comeback. Climate scientists recognize its potential for sustainable agriculture in an era of increasing drought and unpredictable weather. Nutritionists promote it for its health benefits, particularly for diabetics and those seeking alternatives to highly processed grains. The United Nations declared 2023 the International Year of Millets, recognizing these ancient grains as crucial for food security in a changing climate. But the memory of what was lost persists. The accumulated wisdom of 80 centuries, the varieties adapted to every microclimate of northern China, the integrated understanding of how to make harsh land productive. Much of this knowledge died with the people who possessed it. The Great Leap Forward destroyed not only lives but living tradition. There is a poem attributed to Peng Dehuai, the Minister of Defense, who dared to criticize the Great Leap Forward and was purged for his honesty. The millet is scattered over the ground. It reads, "The leaves of the sweet potato are withered. The young and old have gone to smelt iron. To harvest the grain there are only children and old women. How shall we get through the next year?" Peng knew what was happening. Many knew, but in a system where questioning the leader meant death or imprisonment, knowledge without the power to act was merely witness to catastrophe. Foxtail millet still grows in northern China. The grain that sustained human civilization for 8,000 years remains available to anyone willing to cultivate it. But the lesson of the Great Leap Forward extends beyond agriculture. It is a warning about what happens when ideology overrides evidence, when political power silences practical knowledge, when the accumulated wisdom of generations is dismissed as backward thinking by those who have never worked the land. The Yangshao farmers who domesticated millet 6,000 years ago knew something that Mao Zedong did not. The earth does not care about politics. Seeds respond to soil and water and sunlight, not to revolutionary enthusiasm. Close planting kills crops regardless of how fervently you believe otherwise. Deep plowing destroys fertility, whether you are a capitalist or a communist. Reality has no ideology. 30 million people died learning this lesson. The grain that could have saved them was deliberately abandoned. Its cultivators marched away to smelt useless steel. Its techniques declared reactionary. Its wisdom silenced. The Great Leap Forward was indeed a leap, but not forward. It was a leap backward across millennia. From a sophisticated agricultural civilization to mass starvation, the foxtail millet is still here. Still drought-tolerant, still nutritious, still ready to feed whoever is wise enough to plant it. The question is whether we have learned anything from what happened when one man decided that 8,000 years of accumulated knowledge was less valuable than his own vision. If this opened something for you, subscribe. Every share helps preserve the history that should never be forgotten. The next vault opens soon.